Good day, farmers. Welcome to Agribusiness Media weekly webinars on the business of farming. We are excited to have you join us today for our session on grain harvesting and post-harvest management. And after months of late nights and sometimes sleepless and early mornings, the harvesting time brings joy. But the joy can be short-lived if we don't do it right. This is why we thought it's prudent that we provide you with practical tips and strategies to maximize on your yield and minimize losses. We have brought together a panel of experts who will share with us their knowledge and experience with you, our farmers. And our presenters today are Wendy Mazura, the head of agronomy with SeedCo. We have Sitsi Manjengwa, an agronomist with Agricura. We also have Isa Jaidi from ARDAS, formerly Agritex. And we have Ms. Chidemo joining us from the Grain Marketing Board, and she is the Quality Assurance Manager. Welcome you all, our panelists. We do hope that farmers, you have done your system check and you can hear us loud and clear. So how the webinar is going to unfold is we will have presentations, and after all the presentations, we'll then have a question and answer session, and that is going to be very interactive, and this will be right at the end. So please do share with us your questions or comments via the chat here on Zoom, or you can comment if you are watching us live on the Agribusiness Media and SeedCo Facebook pages. Without further ado, let's get started with our first presenter. She is Wendy Mazura. Wendy will be sharing with us some insights on harvesting and post-harvest management. Wendy, please go for it.
Thank you so much, Rollins. It's an honor to be a part of this well-timed webinar where we get to discuss the issues to do with minimizing harvesting and post-harvest losses, because we don't want our farmers to lose at the last hurdle when they have almost won the race. Thank you so much for highlighting that, Rollins. So to kick us off, we're going to start off by showing you some of the harvesting activity which is happening out there. We're going to just show you harvesting activities being done by the communal farmers who have been establishing their crop using the Pfumvudza Intwasa method or the Gachombo method. Then we'll also show you the harvesting being done by commercial farmers using the combine harvester, which is a modern harvesting technology. So we're going to start off by showing you those two video clips, then I'll get into my presentation.
Wendy mwanangu ndiri kufara nairo rigora ndawana gore rinei makore eseka ndinowana hangu asi zvegore rino zvepfupfudzaka zviri mberi ndaita gori rinoshamisa. Onaka ipapa panangotema one line chete miguri yangu 56. Ona ndazadza bhaketi iri. Uri kuona chibage chacho manakire achakaita chakanaka chiri kuyevedza kaichi chinozvitengesa chega ichi chino chiri panapa ichi chacharamba kukwana mubhaketi ndabva ndazotsokonyorera mune chino chikamu tarisa kuzara kwachaita zvakare
chatozara. Saka muri kuti imi miguri 56 ndo yazadza bhaketi iri nechitsama chiri paneichi
kwazvo.
Mune gogo
aiwa
goho renyu aiwa zvakanaka.
Mbeu yeSeedCo imbeu inodzorera. Mbeu ye727 tinoikurudzira kuvarimi.
Aiwa tinozvitenda. Makadii varimi? Mazvinzwira pano tina gogo china nai kuno kuClover Hill Farm. Patiri kuona isusu tiri kuward 4 kumarondera vachitaura ivo nyaya yekuti mbeu yeSeedCo SC727 aiwaka imbeu inodzorera. Ino murimi ungadei? Ngatichimbonzwa iye zvino mazano maringe nenyaya dzekurima nekuchengetedza goho zvakanaka.
Tinokurudzira kuti varimi vachingoona kuti chibage chavo chaoma ngavakurumidze kuchibudisa mumunda chisati chawiswa nemuchuru.
Varimi muchinde makohwa chibage chenyu mukaona kuti hachisa chaoma chiomesei paruware kana pasaga. Kana muchinge maona kuti makuda kuchichengetedza kuisa mudzimba mamunochengetera muya, isai grain protectants kana kushandisa aluminium phosphate tablets. Asi mapiritsi aya anouraya, anoda kuti muise murumu isingashandiswe nevanhu kurara.
Aiwa tinotenda zvikuru mazano ekurudziro ari kubva kunyanzvi dzedu dzehurumende madhumeni manyama. KuSeedCo tinoti isu kurima ibhizimusi. Rimai neSeedCo kuti zvenyu zviendeke. SeedCo ndiwo musha wegoho guru. True indeed. SeedCo is indeed the home of bumper harvests, as you rightfully saw there, Gogo Chinyanyai showing off her produce that she got from a Pumbuza plot. Just to highlight that, the Pumbuza plot that she had established, that was just one Pumbuza plot where she managed to get, instead of 56 cobs coming out of a line and filling one bucket, she managed to fill a bucket with 47 cobs, which is to say the grain that she was getting was more than what is the standard of the Pumbuza plot, because she had established a good variety, SC727, and that's characteristic of all the SeedCo varieties if you establish them well. So the harvesting story is what we are also talking about, where there she was now harvesting at a stage where the crop was now ready. As you could see that now we were shelling the grain, and after the shelling process, she went on to treat the grain. After treating, she then put the grain into storage. So these are some of the issues that we are going to be discussing. We are very happy to be associated with such good farmers as Gogo, and she's just one of many farmers from across the country who have testimonies to share about the success stories, having established successfully SeedCo varieties and adhering to the advice that they are getting in terms of harvesting and post-harvest to reduce losses. At this point, we are going to see the testimonial that's going to come through from Ada in Matebeleland, one of our commercial farmers there, who established about 500 hectares and above of maize. So we are going to listen through and get a few tips on how they establish their crop, their harvesting process, and what they are expecting to get from their establishment. Stay tuned. It's going to be a pegged session. So let's watch the testimonial from Ada in Matebeleland.
Good day, farmers. My name is Ronichi Gombe. I'm the commercial agronomist for SeedCo Zimbabwe. Today we are at ARDAS Antelope here in Mad South Province. We are going to hear from Mrs. Nyai, who is the estate manager at ARDAS Antelope, and is going to take us through on how he managed his crop and the good agronomic practices he implemented on this crop.
Here we have 300 hectares of 659, the new variety that has been introduced by SeedCo, our major supplier of seed. On this field, it is pivot 2, which is 45 hectares. We are almost close to finishing harvesting. We planted this field on the 15th of November, and our fertilizer regime was 500 kgs per hectare of maize blend, and our plant population on this field, it is at 60,000. On our herbiciding, we use the dual together with the atrazine, and it achieved a very good clean weed-free field. You can see the field has a very good standability of the crop. There is no lodging, and the cobs are uniform. Besides that, it has a good ground clearance. Where it starts to have the cobs, it's well above a meter, and it gives us a good cut when we are harvesting. Why we have gone for this new variety, we wanted to see a number of things on our rotation, because we do wheat in winter. It has a very good and fast growing rate, and when it has reached maturity, it dries fast. It would give us another time to harvest.
Well, farmers, we have heard it straight from Mr. Shingai. He gave us a brief explanation on how they managed their crop SC659. This variety is a medium maturity variety, which has a shelling percentage of up to 87%. And this variety has a quicker dry down rate, which gives an opportunity for the farmer to come in with an early winter crop It starts with the right seed. SeedCo, the home of bumper harvest.
The home of bumper harvest, indeed, as you could rightfully see there, on over a 500-hectare block of SC659 established in Matebeleland at ARDAS. So this just goes to show that SeedCo is varieties suited for all farmers across the divide, from the commercial to the communal farmers alike. There is a variety for everyone. So just to get into the presentation, allow me to start sharing my presentation for today. So as a form of introduction, did you know that farmers lose between 20 to 30% of their yield due to poor harvesting and post-harvest handling? This can be at different stages, as you will see in the presentation and in the presentations that are going to come after this one. So the presentation layout is going to be as follows. We'll start by highlighting the importance of harvesting and post-harvest handling, harvesting and harvesting preparations, the harvesting time. When is it that you know that this is the time for you to get in and harvest your crop? The moisture level, which is a critical issue in terms of harvesting. Then there are the harvesting methods that farmers should employ. We will also then highlight some of the grain drying methods and how you can protect your harvest after. Just to highlight that, I am going to be giving you a summarized version of some of the information that is going to come through in greater detail in terms of what you should be doing right through until you get to the selling stage, because it's not a sale until the money goes ka-ching in the pocket. So importance of harvesting and post-harvest handling of grain in Zimbabwe, we need to look at agriculture at a glance. So 60 to 70% of Zimbabwe's population is dependent on agriculture for livelihoods, and agriculture supplies 60% of the raw materials for the industry. The grains used as a staple crop for income generation, particularly looking at maize, and we also find the second most important cereal after maize, which is wheat. Then we also talk about issues to do with post-harvest losses, as we highlighted earlier, being within the ranges of 20 to 30% during harvesting, right through to storage at any stage there, even in transit. Then field and transport losses can also account to a greater 10 to 20%, which is significant. So it's crucial for us to minimize losses and maintain the harvest in prime condition so that we get the qualitative and quantitative value out of our produce. So the pre-harvesting and harvesting tips that we'd like to highlight today include: you need to plan ahead and prepare for the harvest. You need regular maintenance of machinery and adjustments if they need to be made. You need to buy the necessary parts if the equipment have to be used during harvesting is yours or you own it. You need to make sure that it's well oiled and greased ahead of the harvesting period. Then you also need to check the equipment, calibrate it, so that you don't incur losses through breakages, splits when you are harvesting. Then the drying facilities should also be cleaned, ready and tidy, waiting for the new grain to come in. In terms of the days to maturity or the time of harvesting, how do you know that your crop is ready for harvesting? Yes, we can use the days to maturity in relation to the altitude at which we will have established our crops, where we say a variety might mature earlier. For example, the 700 series 727 Nzou, if it's established in the low veld area where the heat units are higher, it might mature much earlier than the same variety being established in the watershed area in Mashonaland East Province or in Mount Cylinder, which is Region 1, or in Nyanga. So the days to maturity are not set on stone. They will depend on the heat units in a given area. But yes, the days to maturity, the range that we give you, usually covers all the different periods or the areas in which the crop will be established. Then we look at the senescence, or the aging of the plant, where we talk about issues to do with the dry down of the leaves, the change of color, the change of outlook of the crop. But that again may be misleading alone, because in some instances it might be due to poor management or forced senescence due to climatic conditions, like what we saw this year, where there was a premature termination of the season, which resulted in the dry down of the crop much earlier than anticipated. So this is something that we need to couple with the days to maturity so that we don't or hasten to think that the crop is mature when in essence it has just matured out of being forced to get into the next level of development. We need to also take a look at what we call the physiological maturity, where this refers to the end of the dry weight, dry matter accumulation or grain filling, particularly looking at maize. So the physiological maturity of maize, you can tell by seeing a black cake or a black area on the tip of the maize grain, which signifies that the physiological maturity stage has been reached. Then in soybeans, the pods, they also start to turn color, to take the color or which is expected of the variety. If it's cream, if it's a darker shade of brown. Then for sorghum and millet as well, you will see some signs of a black layer on the small little tiny grains. Then looking at the moisture and harvesting, the effect of moisture on grain storage. Moisture is good or bad depending on when and how you're going to harvest your crop. If you harvest your crop at a time when the moisture is still too high, you risk deterioration and spoilage through rots in storage or wherever you're taking your grain, or you risk the decline of your grain at the market. Then the other thing that happens is when the grain is too dry, it's subject to challenges that include the weevils coming in and attacking your grain, reducing the quality. So the ideal moisture that is recommended for maize is around 12.5%, particularly for storage. This has been seen to be good, even if you're going to be storing your grain for a long time. But this year, we saw a waiver being given by the Grain Marketing Board to allow grain to come at a moisture even of 13 to 13.5%. Then the soyabean moisture is at 11%, sorghum 12.5%, and the other grains alike. Excuse me. The effects of high moisture content on grain, as we highlighted earlier on, don't only affect the crops that we alluded to, but they also go extra to affect other crops that include your groundnuts, where you can get even aflatoxins, which are toxic when consumed. So you need to make sure that this fungal disease doesn't occur on your grain when you're harvesting, because it reduces the quality and it makes your grain undesirable. Stored grain with high moisture content increases the rate of sprouting and germination of the seed while it is in storage. Then the harvesting methods. There are a wide range of harvesting methods that can be employed. These include, but are not limited to, hand harvesting methods, where you can use the bang on board trailer, where a farmer who cannot access combines can use this method to make sure that the grain is removed from the field as soon as possible. The other thing that can prompt a farmer to harvest earlier might be the threat of theft, the threat of fire. So you might harvest a bit earlier and you can put in a place where it will dry further, and then you can then process the grain from that point. So the cobs are loaded by throwing directly onto the trailer or board. It is recommended that 6 rows of people be on either side of the board or the trailer, being pulled by the tractor, whereby you can be able to throw at a swath which allows for your cobs to fall into the trailer. Then you can use the drums, sacks, and a trailer as well, where you load the grain into the drums or sacks and then you put into the trailer. Then you can also use empty bags or sacks. Then the other method that farmers use, particularly when they are harvesting soybean, small grains, sugar beans, groundnuts, round nuts, they can use the cutting and threshing method, where they can come in, they cut at the base where the stem meets the ground, and then they thresh with large sticks, or some might use machinery like tractors to move over the grain and thresh it to open it up and release the pods. So some of the harvesting methods highlighted there were the hand harvesting methods. But in terms of the mechanical methods that you can come in with a combine harvester. This applies to those farmers who understand the importance of using modern technologies to harvest, to increase the ease of the operation and the timeliness of the operation, as you heard from ARDA, where they were using a combine harvester to come in early with their wheat crop, because timeliness indeed is next to godliness. This also applies to farming, where if you miss the planting window of one planting season, you will have a ripple effect of negative results on the other successive seasons that are going to come for about 2 to 3 seasons until you correct it. So it's important for you to invest in such technologies and such equipment as a combine harvester where possible, or even hire. You don't even need to own the combine harvester. You can even hire from reputable suppliers. There are different suppliers like AFC through the arm of the Ministry of Agriculture, or other farmers who might have their own equipment, have finished using it and are willing to lease it out. Then the drying methods, you can use natural drying, which requires a sunny weather, where we discourage direct sunlight where possible on some produce, which might also deteriorate in quality. But in terms of you drying your grain, if you're going to be putting it on the ground, avoid direct, placing the grain directly on the ground. Excuse me, as this has a risk of accumulating moisture from the ground and affecting the grain, resulting in the grain rotting. Artificial drying can also be done where heat is forced into the grain to release the moisture so that the grain dries to the desired level. So this might require you to incur extra costs, but it might be justified if you need to come in with your next crop on time, particularly if you're doing commercial farming operations, since farming is indeed a formidable business. So as we move towards winding up, some of the drying methods that are available, there's the traditional grain drying structure, which is the dara, as you can see there, filled to the tip. As you can see, the gentleman there who's trying to get down from it, that's a variety of SC659 established in Midlands province, and they are celebrating and they have a bumper harvest indeed. Then we also have the artificial grain dryer structure there, a smaller version of it in the middle. Then we have a larger scale artificial dryer there, which allows the farmer to dry the grain faster and get it out and to the market as soon as possible, even when the prices are still favorable. So protecting the harvest, there are 3 basic steps that should be followed. The first thing that farmers need to do is to understand the importance of sanitation. So sanitation, you need to clean your storage place, spray, fill up the cracks, clean the grain. Make sure that if you have old grain that was in that storage, you need to isolate it or put it away so that it doesn't contaminate the new grain when it comes out. Chemical treatment is also encouraged. Appropriate applications of grain protectants, which you will hear as we progress with the webinar. Inspection of the grain on a regular basis. Don't just leave things to chance and assume that since the grain is now in storage, you can now go on holiday for the whole year and come back and consume the grain. You will find there will be nothing for you to consume. In Shona, they say, munowana machira chete. Saka, we want to encourage you to be on top of the situation. Check regularly to see if your grain is still in tip-top condition for you to use it at a later stage. Stored grain may deteriorate if the grain temperature is too high, as we highlighted. It may deteriorate if the grain moisture is too low. It may also be affected by diseases. Then insects multiply, or rodents, they can also come in storage. So this is what you should look at. So we encourage our farmers to employ the FIFO concept, where we say the grain that went into storage first should be used first, while the grain that goes in last should be used last. So thoroughly cleaning is recommended. You can spray as well some chemicals that I will not delve into, as another presenter is going to look at that. Then in terms of grain storage, you can use bulk storage, where you are just storing your grain in large metal silos or other silos that you might have, but you can also use bagged grain storage facilities. Grain storage checks, you need to check as well in terms of loading your grain in and out. Do you have ease of loading and offloading the grain when you want to use it? Constantly check on the temperature as well and relative humidity so that the grain doesn't deteriorate under your nose when you think everything is under control. Manage all insect pests before storage of the grain. So these are just examples of the grain storage facilities where you see there the grain silos, a typical sign of where you are most likely to find a GMP facility there. And then we also have the rural granary, where you see there are boulders, large boulders there, and granary is on top, which is to say, even at the rural areas, they understand the importance of avoiding directly having the grain of or the storage room sitting on the ground because moisture might accumulate. Then we have the metal silos, which is a new technology that has come into play. We also have the bagged maize, which is on pellets, as you can see there in that large storage shed. Then we also now have the hermetic bags, which are not shown here, which can also be used for storage. So in summary, pre and post-harvest losses can account to about 40% of losses in the grain if you fail to check them. So pre-harvest checks, machinery, drying facilities, as well as storage facilities. Different crops have different physiological maturities and moisture levels that are required. Then harvesting can be done by hand or by machine. So there's no excuse for you to say, I won't farm or I want to do cropping because I don't have the machinery to then harvest. Use what you have because farming is a forgiving business. Protecting the harvest is important. The grain must be kept at a recommended moisture level and it must be kept in uniform moisture as highlighted. Please protect your grain from rodents and birds or any other such which might deteriorate the crop. On that note, I'd like to thank you and wish you a successful harvesting season ahead of the start of the next farming season, which is the 2023-24 farming season. And remember, it all starts with the right seed. There's no bumper harvest without SeedCo. Thank you so much, Rollins. Over to you.
Thank you, Wendy, for such a wonderful presentation and for sharing the SeedCo story. If you do have any questions or comments for her, please do share with us via the chat room here on Zoom, or you can comment if you are watching us live on our Facebook page. Next up is Isa Jaidi, and he will cover tips on successful maize harvesting or grain harvesting and storage.
Yellow farmers, we are during that time of the year where harvesting of maize is in progress. We need to understand when the farmers should harvest their maize. There are indicator points that allows us to know when we should harvest. The first indicator point is that maize should have reached the physiological maturity. Despite reaching the physiological maturity, which can be reached when the maize is even up to 30% dry. But at 30% dry, maize cannot be shelled well when it is harvested. So another key indicator is to say your maize should have dried to a moisture level that allows it to shell well from the cob. We are looking at the region of 18% thereabout. But how do you harvest the maize? When you harvest the maize, there are 2-3 ways of doing it. One way you can do it manually. Manually, we are using hands, people to just go into the field, harvest the maize, and maybe take it to a crib or to a storage place. Another way of doing it, you could be using the mixture of human beings and machines. You can harvest your maize using hands or labor, and the labor takes the maize to the sheller where it is shelled. Or you can preferably use a combine harvester that does both the gathering of the maize and the shelling, and the maize comes out as grain from the combine harvester. The beauty of using a combine harvester is the pace of doing things is a bit faster. You combine events in one pass. But what you have to remember when you're using a combine harvester, there are fans there that have got to be adjusted very well, because the fans, they blow the chaff after the maize would have been shelled. And if the fan is not adjusted well, you run the risk of throwing the grain together with the chaff that goes out of the combine harvester. But mind you, this time of the year when we are harvesting, we are saying we are harvesting when the moisture is still high, because we want to allow the field to accommodate other crops, particularly wheat. We then have to make sure we dry this maize. As we go to storage, we want to store maize that is about 12.5% to store a bit longer. But the maize we're harvesting has got a moisture content that is more than 13.5. We are looking in the region of maybe 16 to 20% this time of the year when we're harvesting. So we need to dry the maize. The maize can preferably be dried in a crib. If you are going to be using a crib, make sure moisture is going to be able to pass through the crib from either side of the crib to pass through the crib. Preferably orient your crib in a direction of west to east to allow air to drive through the crib. Then the other way of drying it, you want to make sure you take this maize to a maize dryer where you are going to be using artificial means of driving hot air into the maize. And the advantage of using the dryers the current ones that are stationed at GMBs and other people who are offering the services, is that when you are drying the maize will be mechanically moved, and there is no possibility that some other portions of the maize will not be reached with the right air temperature to make sure it dries. If you store in a crib, if the crib is too big, you run the risk of having mold maize in the crib. We are looking at post-harvest. Normally, farmers are used to say harvesting of maize ends at grain delivery. Harvest of maize doesn't end at grain delivery. We are also looking at the stover that is in the field. The maize stover can also be looked after to make sure it doesn't waste after having harvested the maize. We can bale the maize stover. After baling the maize stover, it should be stored in a cool, dry place where there are no leaks. The leaks will make sure the stover dries or gets bad before it is used by our livestock. Then in terms of storage of the maize, there are various other means of storing the maize. We want to make sure you protect that maize from other rodents and the pilferage, that is theft. And when you are storing the maize, you can also use the other methods that are going to be stocked up, like the hermetic bag, storing the maize out of in the absence of oxygen. You want to make sure the maize is stored in places where oxygen is excluded. That's the hermetic condition. This is it, farmers, when you are talking about post-harvest in terms of maize. Thank you, farmers.
Many thanks, Isa Jaidi, for the tips. Grain storage is key to ensuring that your harvest remains in good quality. Joining us to cover on that issue and to give us more insights is Tsitsi Manjengwa from Agricura, and she'll be sharing some tips on how we can store our grain properly. Please go for it, Tsitsi.
I'm Tsitsi Manjengwa from Agricura Sales Agronomy. I will be sharing with you today on the Masters of Grain Storage Techniques. To start with, I will present on the layout of our presentation. This includes the introduction, preparation of storage structures and equipment, the grain storage techniques, Agricura grain dust, the solution, common insects in grain storage, aluminum phosphide tablets, another solution, safe use of grain protectants, and the distribution points. A grain protectant is an insecticide that is applied to the grain when it will be loaded into the storage structures. And these storage structures include the farm silos and the hoses. These grain protectants do play an important role in grain storage. They help in preserving the quality of the grain from insect damage. Grain storage is a vital aspect of farming that ensures food security and income generation for farmers. It also poses many challenges as insects infestations, fungal growth, moisture damage, and quality deterioration if we do not control the grain. But to overcome these challenges, farmers need to adopt best practices in order to have our good grain, and to have also innovative techniques and the safe use of using these grain protectants. Grain protectants are not a substitute for good storage practices. They should be used in combination with other measures, such as sanitation, aeration, cooling, moisture management, just as our other speaker Wendy was speaking about, and regular monitoring of grain quality and insect activity. I will move on to the preparation of storage structures and equipment. What are the things that we need to prepare for when we want to store our grains? Before storing the grain, farmers should prepare the storage structures and equipment to ensure that they are clean, they are dry, and they are pest-free. Farmers should also remove the old grain, the dust, the debris, and the spilled grain from the storage structures and equipments. They should also disinfect them with appropriate chemicals or a heat treatment to kill any insects or fungi that may be present. They should also be in a position to repair any cracks, walls, or leaks in the storage structures and equipment to prevent moisture ingress and pest entry. They should also install proper ventilation, aeration, and drainage system to maintain optimal temperature and humidity levels in the environment. And these are some of the grain storage techniques that we should adopt as farmers. The grain should be stored at a moisture content of 12.5% or less to prevent things like fungal growth and spoilage. Also to monitor the stored grain regularity for any signs of deterioration and infestation. Temperature, moisture, odor, color, texture, weight, and insect activity should be checked of the grain at least once per month. Farmers should also use appropriate methods to control the pest outbreaks that may occur in the store grains. These may include fumigation, heat treatment, biological control, or physical removal, to mention a few. We move on to one of our solutions for the stored grain insects. This is Agricura grain dust, which contains of pyrimiphos, methyl, and thiamethoxam. This product controls insects which include the flower beetles, the weevils, the moths, larger grain borer, lesser grain borer. It works in many crops, which include maize, wheat, sorghum, rice, sugar beans, to mention a few. It can last for 9 to 12 months once applied, and it can be consumed after 7 days. The application of this Agricura grain dust is 25 grams per 50 kgs or 500 grams per 1 ton. These are some of the common pests that are found in stored grain. The first one on the upper top being the weevil, Shipukuto. Then there is the grain beetle, the lesser grain borer, the flower beetles. These are some of the insects that affect our stored grain, and we should be alert to control these. We move on to another solution that we can use, and these are the aluminium phosphide tablets. This fumigant is for the control of stored grain, which include maize, groundnuts, tobacco, sorghum, etc. It kills quite a range of stored pests and as well as all stages of the insect development, including the eggs, the larva, the pupa, and the adult. The application rate for these tablets is 1 kg per 30 ton of maize or any grain, or either 1 pill per 90 kg of the grain that we'll be controlling. It can be consumed after 10 to 14 days. That will be the safe period to consume, while when the fumigation process will be over, and we have to leave it for the ventilation. Then thereafter, it will be safe for consumption. And we encourage farmers when to use these aluminium phosphide tablets, not to use them directly in contact with the grain, but to enclose in a cotton wool or a cloth, as these will be producing the phosphine gas, which is hazardous to our health. Then there's safe use of grain protectants. These are the general requirements that every farmer or every user of the grain protectants or fumigants should be in a position to do or follow. You should always read the label before using the chemical or the grain protectant, either the fumigant. We should handle with care to avoid contact with eyes or the skin. Therefore, we should be wearing protective clothing such as gloves, respirator, rubber boots, and goggles. We should not drink, eat, or smoke when applying these pesticides. We should always keep out of reach of children when using these type of products. We should also keep away from foodstuffs. We should store in original container, and also remember to destroy the empty containers after use. These are the distribution points where you can get the Agricura grain dust and the aluminium phosphide tablets. You can be free to visit all our Agricura outlets nationwide, the farm and city shops, the vet distributors, Okmart, Omnia, Bola, Maguire's. Thank you.
Thank you, Siti, for such a wonderful and informative presentation. And if you do have any questions for her, please type in the chat room here on Zoom, or you can comment if you're watching us live on the Agribusiness Media Facebook page. It is crucial that we maintain our grain in good quality, as that translates into profit and revenue for our farm business. Ms. Chideme from the Grain Marketing Board will be sharing with us some tips on how we can do it right.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Chidemo, I'm going to present on the post-harvest management on maize, soybeans, and groundnuts. My presentation is going to be in 4 sections, whereby I will present on functions of the GMB in post-harvest management and functions of the post-harvest management in GMB, critical factors, and on-farm post-harvest handling. Grain Marketing Board is a parastatal formed by the Act of Chapter 18 of 14. What the major functions of Grain Marketing Board is to ensure that order marketing of controlled products within any prescribed area is done. Also to buy and sell any controlled products which are then delivered or acquired. To provide storage, handling, and processing facilities for controlled products. Maintain stocks of controlled products. Import or export controlled products. I'm going to zero on one of the major functions of Grain Marketing Board, which is providing storage, handling, and processing facilities for controlled products. So I'll start by defining what we really refer to the term post-harvest management. Post-harvest management is a system of handling, storing, and transporting agricultural commodities after harvest. So we are saying, after harvesting our produce, we expect our produce to get to the table in a good quality, or we expect our product to get to the table in the right quantity and quality. So what are the objectives of post-harvest management? The first objective is quality preservation. Second objective is reduction in losses of our harvests, food security, economic benefits, market access, sustainability. So what we mean by quality preservation is when we harvest our grain or when we harvest our produce, we are supposed to ensure that we maintain our quality. We don't have to lose the quality in terms of color, in terms of taste. We don't have to lose color in terms of quality in terms of nutrient value. Also, we are supposed to reduce losses when we harvest our grain from the farm to the table. There are a lot of losses which happen. These losses can be done when you are handling. Losses can be through transportation, or they can be in storage. Also, post-harvest management is critical in food security, economic benefits, market access, and sustainability. So what are the critical factors in post-harvest management? The critical factors are harvesting. One of the major critical factors is harvesting, whereby we have to harvest at the required time. The other critical factor is drying, whereby grain should be dried or harvested as soon as possible to minimize moisture content as soon as it reaches maturity level, so that we minimize moisture content. Grains have got different moisture contents, and an optimum moisture content is required for safe storage. Cleaning and sorting of impurities, damaged grains, and foreign materials must be done before storage. We also expect our storage infrastructure to be suitable for storage of grain or of our produce. If we want to store our produce for a certain time, we need to, for a certain time, we need to make sure that the infrastructure meets the required standards. The other factor is the quality control. Its quality control in post-harvest management is critical in the sense that we need to do regular checks of our produce, where we'll be storing our grain, how we'll be handling our grain from the point of harvest and to the storage facilities. You need to check on pests, you need to check on temperature, we need to check on mold development and other factors like humidity. So when we are talking of maize, soybeans, and groundnuts, we are post-harvest management. We are basically saying maize has got its standards, which we expect to maintain during the post-harvest, like the moisture content. We expect maize to have a moisture content of 12.5. We expect soybeans to have a moisture content of 11.5, groundnuts of 7. The moisture content is critical in post-harvest management in the sense that if we don't maintain the right moisture content, it means that our grain will develop some molds, our grain will deteriorate. We end up having spoilage spoilage of our grain. We end up having mycotoxins in our grain. So moisture content is critical. Then also the issue of cleaning. When we store grain, our grain is supposed to be clean because the dried leaves, stalks, and weeds quickly makes our grain to deteriorate, to have some molds. Infestation is also one of the issues which we need to check on. Infestation and the temperature. Stored grain is actually exposed to a lot of storage insects, such that if we don't control infestation, we end up losing our grain due to insect damage. Then temperature is also a very critical factor. A grain is supposed to be stored at optimal temperatures which are not too hot for the grain. High temperatures will promote development of insects. High temperatures will promote chemical reactions, and we will lose our grain at the end of the day. Also infestation, with infestation, we have got hidden infestation, which we need to take to take note of and make sure that it's well controlled. Grain grading. So all grain procured by GMB from farmers must be of an acceptable quality to ensure that it is fit for human consumption and it is suitable for long-term storage without quickly going bad. GMB is actually guided by the grain standards statutory instrument 140 of 2013, which determines the acceptable quality of grain, and these standards classify grain into various grades. There are key factors that determine the quality of grain. These include grain moisture content, extraneous matter, broken, diseased, and insect damaged. The post-harvest management will not start with grain marketing board, but instead it starts with the farmer. Farmers must prepare for the post-harvest handling activities before the crop is harvested. They should ensure that necessary equipment for post-harvest activities is in place. Drying and threshing place has to be prepared. The storehouse of the area must be thoroughly cleaned. Farmers must ensure that grain bags are available. Grains must not be harvested in wet conditions. These are the on-farm post-harvest handling activities which we expect from at the farm. After the drying process, grain is usually dried. So after the drying process, grain is usually shelled. Shelling must be done in such a way that damage to the grain is reduced. Shelling techniques that crush or damage grain are not recommended because damaged grain is much more prone to attack by storage pests. After shelling, grain is then cleaned and the quality can be improved by winnowing, sieving, and picking to remove trash, extraneous matter, and insect damage diseases. Shelled and clean grain can then be bagged for resale. So when we talk of post-harvest management in grain marketing board, it starts with the farmer from the farm to the table. That is from the day when we harvest to the day when we put food on the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chidemo, for such an informative presentation. Now we are in the question and answer segment of our webinar. And please do feel free to share with us any questions or comments that you may have via the chat here on Zoom, or you can comment if you are watching us live on the Agribusiness Media and SeedCo Facebook pages. And the first question that we are taking is, thanks, Wendy, for your presentation. Please come again on the FIFO concept.
Thank you so much, Rollins. So what we were trying to emphasize is the importance of understanding that something that's put in storage for a longer time has chances of deteriorating over that period of time and losing quality and being prone to insect pest damage and disease damage. So you don't want to introduce new grain to the old grain, which was already in storage, which might then introduce those challenges to the fresh grain that you're putting in storage. So this then speaks to the method of storage that you are going to employ. If you are going to be putting your grain in a dura, for example, a rural granary, you need to make sure that the loading area is at the top side where you are going to be loading fresh grain on top. Then the offloading area is somewhere at the bottom or at another end where you know that this is the offloading bay or the offloading door or window. So that you don't then end up loading through one point and offloading through the same point. Then if you're going to be storing your grain in a larger facility, like those big sheds that we were seeing, you need to demarcate clearly where your old grain will be sitting versus where your fresh grain will be sitting. And for those who are going to be storing their grain in bulk in those sheds, they can also use other methods of grain storage that were highlighted by Agricura there and other suppliers who are available. You can come in with fumigation on a regular basis, bearing in mind the level of caution that you need to employ because some of them are very dangerous. So the FIFO concept just speaks to first in, first out. So what goes in first should be used first. What goes in last should be used last. In a nutshell, that's what I was trying to just highlight. Back to you, Rollins.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Wendy, for taking that one. Our next question says, thanks, Agricura. How do we deal with fake grain protectants on the market? All right, whilst it is trying to reconnect, I think dealing with fake grain protectants, the best way is to only buy from reputable suppliers. Don't buy any product, any seed, any crop chemical from the streets. Always buy from reputable suppliers. And the next one says, thanks, Wendy. I liked the SeedCo story you shared. Is it advisable to store maize in drums?
Thank you so much, Rollins. I was speaking and I was on mute. So I just want to highlight that there are different methods of storing grain now that are available. The important thing is to make sure that where you are storing your grain, it depends on the time frame in which you need to store your grain. So the metal silos are available that are designed. They are not just an ordinary drum. They are designed to make sure that it's airtight because you don't want there to be any living organism that might be there in your grain that might affect the quality. So the metal silos are available. I'm sure through your Agritech's extension officers and the Ministry of Agriculture through the mechanization department can lead you in the right direction as to whether you would want to create your own metal silo, what you would need to do. But the important thing is to understand that we want to remove or air that might be inside to make the grain storage facility airtight, particularly if it's a drum or if it's a container which is meant to store for a longer period. So there are options available. The metal silo, the hermetic bags, they are also available, and you can get more information through Agritech and through other specialists who deal particularly in those products.
All right, thanks again, Wendy. The next question is for Mr. Jaidi. It says, what's your recommended harvesting method for small-scale farmers? Mr. Jaidi, if you are on the call, if you can take that one, I'll read the question. It says, what's your recommended harvesting method for small-scale farmers? If not, maybe Wendy, if you can attempt on that one.
Thank you, Rollins, definitely. So I think harvesting methods depend on your means. If you are resource endowed, which is to say you have a lot of resources, then you can opt for the more sophisticated, expensive, but more efficient harvesting. That include the combine harvesters. Even small scale farmers, some doing 3, 5 hectares, 6, they can get a combine harvester just for the ease that it brings. But if you don't, and maybe the area that you're producing is small, which we recommend as well, because we're not talking about intensifying production, rather than you just counting the hectares that you have, you need to have a population associated to the hectare. So small scale farmers can harvest using by hand. It depends. If you don't have labor or manpower to harvest by hand, then maybe you can do it gradually. Or you can start off by staking the maize. You cut off the maize while it's still a bit wet, maybe to will have reached physiological maturity, but the moisture at physiological maturity is still at around 30%. So it still needs to go down further. So you cut down the stalks at the base where it meets the ground. You create stakes that resemble a pyramid. Then you create those stakes. Then maybe it's easier for you to then assemble a smaller gang to then pluck out the cobs from the stalks when the time is appropriate. So you can use that method. But if the labor is available, you can just go in at once, you're harvesting, putting in sacks or throwing in at a centralized point, and then collecting the cobs, and then for sorting at a later stage. The Fumvudza method, with these lines, you can just harvest maybe a few lines at a time, because it's designed to give you enough to consume over a period of time. So you can harvest depending on the number of lines that you want to use. If you're going to the market, you can just harvest the whole block, or you can harvest 2 or 3 blocks. So there are different ways of harvesting, but any farmer should be guided by the resource endowment that they have at their farm or within their means.
Thanks so much, Wendy. And the next question says, I think it's for Ms. Chidemo. It says, may we have the current GMB prices for maize?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make a rundown on the current prices for maize is 335, but on 335, 200 will be in US dollars and 135 will be at interbank rate. Thank you.
All right, thank you for answering this one. Then how do we avoid aflatoxins in storage? It's for GMB.
Okay, thank you. Aflatoxin is mainly promoted by the humidity. So the major issue which you need to check on is humidity when we are talking of aflatoxins. High humidity promotes growth of aflatoxins. So in storage, the issue of humidity is very critical. That's why we start by checking the moisture content even before we put it in storage. Whilst in storage, there are systems and procedures again, which we do to ensure that moisture content is always controlled. We aerate our silos, we aerate our stacks to ensure that humidity is controlled. However, the aeration is also determined by the humidity in the environment. So we may need to make use of other technologies whereby we pump in hot air to make sure that that humidity is, that high moisture is released, or that humidity is reduced in storage. Thank you.
All right, thank you for explaining on that one. Then where can I buy grain protectants in Bindura? Not Tsitsi, if you can take that one.
Oh yes, I'm back. To answer this, we have a branch in Bindura town. That's where you can get the grain protectant, as well as OK, and our other distributors like vet distributors. You can also get the grain protectants there.
All right, thanks. I think there was also another one. It was about Karoi. Do you have any branches there in Karoi distribution points?
Oh yes, in Karoi we do have a branch, and it's located at number 116 in Karoi Township, next to Megasafe. That's where our branch is in Karoi. 116 in town, next to Megasafe.
All right, thanks, Tsitsi. The next question says, how long can we consume grain after applying a grain protectant? I think that's for you, Tsitsi.
Okay, the grain protectant the grain can be safe for consumption after 7 to 10 days of applying the grain protectant. But if it's tablets, it's after 2 weeks straight.
Okay, please do come again there, Tsitsi. You said for grain protectants is how long?
7 to 10 days. That's when the grain will be safe for consumption.
All right, thank you. Then 2 weeks, that's for the tablets.
Yes.
All right, thank you. And does your grain protectant work in soybean?
Yes, it does work, just like it does in other grains like maize and sugar beans. It also works in soybeans as well.
All right, thanks, Tsitsi. Then thanks, Agricura, for covering the safe use of grain protectants. It's important. Okay, that's a comment from one of the farmers. I think those are the questions that we had. And before we conclude this session, we would like to invite each presenter for their parting shots.
Okay, I would like to just emphasize on the instructions on the labels, that when farmers are using the grain protectants, please may we ensure that we read all the instructions and follow them carefully so that we can be safe. It will be safe for our health in particular. That's all I can say.
Thank you very much for your time and expertise. We appreciate your commitment to helping our farmers succeed. In conclusion, we would like to thank you all our presenters for sharing your knowledge with us today. Wendy Mazura, she was representing SeedCo. We had Tsitsi Manjengwa from Agricura, Isa Jaidi from ARDAS, formerly Agritex, and Ms. Chidemo, she was joining us from the Grain Marketing Board. We would like to also thank their respective organizations for making this event a success. Remember, the business of farming is not just about planting and harvesting, but also about effective management and making informed decisions. We look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Until then, happy farming.